Yeah, today's daf is Nun Dalet. Actually, we're going to start on Nun Gimel Amud Bet at the very bottom with the two dots where it says Rabbi Yosef Gilili. So Rabbi Yosef Gilili, this is 4 lines up from the bottom. Havaka Azel B'Orcha. He was walking on the way. Ashkecha Levruriya. He ran into the wife of Rabbi Meir, who is a very famous woman by the name of Bruriya. And Amarla, he said to her, Be'ezo derech nilech lalod. What is the right way to get to Lod? Which street should I take? Amrale, she said to him, Galili shote, you foolish person from Galilee. Lo kach amru chachamim, didn't the chachamim say, Al tarbesim sicha imaisha, you shouldn't talk too much to women. Right? This is in Pirkei Avot. Why? She was, I don't know why she picked on him. Right, so it said, yeah. So he says you shouldn't speak too much with a woman. You should have just said 2 words to me instead of 3 or 4 words. Because he said he said 4 words. She said, why are you speaking to women so much? You should have said 2 words to me instead of 4. So why exactly she decided to pick on Rabbi Yosef, I'm not sure. But definitely Bruriya has a reputation in the Talmud for being a very independent woman and very sort of like an early feminist, very smart. Yeah, it talks about in the Tosefta that she would learn. That's not in the Talmud. That's only in the Rashi. But in the Tosefta it talks about how she would go from, she would learn 400 halachot a day from different rabbis, and that there's a case in the Tosefta where where there was an argument among the rabbis, and it said halacha k'bruriya. That she defeats the rabbis in halachic debate. So she was obviously very smart and very knowledgeable, and maybe she didn't like the negative statements about men and women.
So the story about the Resef, it's not
that story about the it's in Rashi. It's not. So I don't know where it comes from because there's some other interpretations. It just says something happened in their life, exactly. So it's not clear. And Rashi gives that explanation, and then some other people say that it could be that the Romans drove out Rabbi Meir, and it didn't have directly to do with any of that. So it's not clear. But anyway, she definitely was controversial in some ways. That's for sure. So Bruriya ashkachte lahu talmida davaka garis bilchisha. Bruriya saw a student who was studying quietly, but shabe, she kicked him. So she's very straightforward. She doesn't. Amrale, she said to him, Lo kach katuv. Doesn't it say arucha bakol ushmura, that it's arranged in everything, ushmura, and it's guarded? What does that mean? Arucha bakol im arucha b'remach evarim shelcha. If it's organized, if the Torah, in other words, is engaged by all of your evarim, by your entire body, then mishtameret, it will be kept. V'im lav, and if not, ina mishtameret. In other words, what she was saying was, don't learn in silence. Speak and engage all of your energy, learning aloud. So this is where the tradition comes from in yeshivot, that people, when they learn, that even when they're on their own, you hear them. They are very loud, and they read to them. They're reading to themselves, but they read aloud, because the more engaged you are with the learning, the more it's going to stick with you. And this is what Bruriya is telling the students: don't speak. Don't learn in silence, but engage with all of your limbs, with your entire energy, and that way you'll have the Torah with you. It'll be internalized at a deeper level. It was taught that there was a student of Rabbi Eliezer, and he would study in silence. In other words, he didn't speak out loud when he was learning. After 3 years, he forgot everything that he learned. In other words, he didn't remember it at the same level. And this is certainly, even, I think there's scientific research to back up this idea as well, that if that when you read things aloud, since more senses are engaged, more of your senses are engaged in the process, you end up retaining it better than if you just read it with your, just reading it, scanning it with your eyes and without speaking. Tana Talmid Echad Haya LeRabbi Eliezer. It was similarly taught that there was a student of Rabbi Eliezer that he did some sin that required srefa lamakom, that he sinned against God in a way that he required srefa, he required burning. In other words, he deserved death because of this terrible sin. Amru, but they said, Hanichu lo adam gadol shimesh, leave him alone because he served a great person. In other words, he had the zechut of serving Rabbi Eliezer, of being the student of Rabbi Eliezer. So even though he had done some some terrible crime that he deserved, to be burnt, he was spared. Now, some of the Mefarshim say that what was the terrible crime? It was that he learned in a way that he didn't remember it. In other words, because the Pirkei Avot says that somebody who's shocheach davar echad mitalmudo, if a person forgets even one thing from their learning, mitchayev benafsho, then he's liable for his life. So a person who learns in a way deliberately that he knows he's not going to retain it because he's reading without speaking and he's just scanning it with his eyes, that person also is considered to be doing something terrible. But he was spared because his teacher was Rabbi Eliezer and he faithfully served Rabbi Eliezer. Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, sharp one, petach pomech kiri, petach pomech tani. When you read, open your mouth. Okay, when you read Torah shebichtav, when you read the Tanakh, open your mouth. When you read the Mishnah, open your mouth. Ki hechi detitkayem bech v'torich hayeh, so that it will stay with you and your life will be long. Shneimar, as it says, Ki chayim hem lemotzehem, because it is life to those who find it. In other words, the Torah is life to those who find it. Words of Torah, that's why it's in plural, because it's the words of Torah are life to those who find them. Ulchol b'saro marpeh, and they heal your entire flesh. Al tikre lemotzehem. Don't read it as lemotzehem, those who find them. Ela lemotziehem bapeh. It means the person who speaks them out of their mouth. In other words, a person who speaks the words of Torah and doesn't just read them with his eyes. That's the person who's going to internalize it, it's going to stay with him, and it's going to lengthen his days and improve his life. Amar le Shmuel Rav Yehuda. Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, sharp one, chatof v'yachol chatof. Grab and eat, grab and drink, because the world that we're going to leave is like a party. It's like a wedding. In other words, have a good so Rashi interprets this as meaning enjoy life while you can. Grab what you can eat, grab what you can drink. Because when you go to a party, what do you say to yourself? I might be on a diet, but hey, there's food here that I'm not going to be able to taste for a long time because it's a fancy wedding, it's a fancy party. I want to take advantage of it. So that's what Shmuel was saying to Rav Yehuda. He said to him, enjoy life, grab what you can while you can. Right? Why should you let it pass you by? You might not have another chance. So it's like going to a wedding. You might not have another chance to have such gourmet food in the future. However, some of the Mefarshim interpret it the opposite way. Chatof v'achol means eat quickly and drink quickly. Meaning, don't waste your time on the pleasures of life, because life is fleeting like a wedding. You're only going to be here so long, and make sure you use your time to the best of your ability for spiritual things. So don't dwell too much on the fleeting pleasures, but try to make the best out of the time for spiritual gain and spiritual growth. Amar le Rav Hamnuna. Rav said to Rav Hamnuna, Bini, my son, im yesh lecha hetev lecha she'en b'shol tanuk. If you have, enjoy it. Right? Im yesh lecha. If you have, hetev lecha. Treat yourself well. She'en bish'ol ta'anug, because there's no enjoyment in the pit. In other words, in the grave, there's no enjoyment. Ve'en lamavet titmamea, and there's no waiting in death. In other words, that you can die suddenly. You never know when death is going to come upon you. So you're not going to enjoy life in the grave, and you don't know when death is coming. Ve'im tomar aniach livni chok. And if you say to yourself, no, I want to amass money, I don't want to spend my money. In other words, what he's saying is, if you have money, spend it now. Don't hold on to it. You don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow, and you can't use it in the grave. And maybe you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to save it for my children. Chok, I'm going to save them a portion. Bishol mi yagid lecha. Who's going to tell you in the pit? In other words, when you die, who's going to tell you if your children really held on to the money either? Maybe they're going to lose the money. Maybe they're going to put it in a bad investment. Now you know that you have it. Use it now. And anyway, what enjoyment will you get when you're in the grave from the fact that your children have your money? That's not going to benefit you. Use it now. That's what he told them. Bnei ha'adam domim le'isvei hasadeh. People are like blades of grass. Halalu notzatin v'halalu novelin. Some are sprouting up and some are wasting away. In other words, death and life are a cycle. Just like you might die and your children will live. So Rashi explains, when people grow, their parnasa and their wealth grows with them. You don't have to worry about them. Meaning, don't worry about your children so much. They'll stand up on their own. They'll be able to survive. Enjoy what you've got, because your life is going to fade out, and you want to take advantage of the time and the opportunities that you have here. Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, if a person's walking on the way and he doesn't have any escort, yasok b'Torah, he should learn Torah. Because it says ki livyat chen hem. It says about the Divrei Torah, they are livyat chen. Livyat chen probably means some kind of Right, that's how they're interpreting it. But now, really, when it says, it doesn't say livayatchen, it says livyatchen, because what it's talking about is some kind of jewelry. In other words, it's talking about some kind of adornment. It's an adornment of grace. But they're reading it as livaya. They're reading it as escort of grace. That what escorts you if you don't have a person with you? Divrei Torah. So when I used to have to walk when I was a teenager, and I used to have to walk to synagogue 45 minutes or 50 minutes back and forth every Shabbat, and I would go by myself in the morning because I wanted to be on time. So I would leave early, and I used to always learn something before that I could think about and go over in my head on the way to synagogue. So I would have something to do. Otherwise, a 45-minute walk back and a 45-minute walk back would be very deadening. So it's a worthwhile activity to do. Chash b'rosho, if you have a headache, yasok b'torah, you should also learn Torah Shnei Amar, because it says kivliat chenhem leroshecha. They are an adornment of grace for your head. So if you have a headache, the best thing to do is to learn Torah. Chash b'grono, if you have pain in your throat, yasok b'torah, you should learn Torah Shnei Amar v'anakim legargarotecha, because it says they are like necklace around your neck. Chash b'me'av, if you're having pain in your stomach, yasok b'torah, you should also learn Torah Shnei Amar rifut tehi l'shorecha, because it says it will be healing for your belly button. Chash b'atzmotav, if you're having pain in your bones, yasok b'torah, you should learn Torah Shnei Amar v'shikui l'atzmotecha, that it's going to be a healing for your bones. So in other words, the Torah is the catch-all. You have any kind of problem? You need an escort to walk with you? You got pain in your head, you got a pain in your stomach, you got a pain in your bones? Learn Torah, and the Torah is going to be a source of healing for you. And chash b'chol gufo, even if you have pain in your entire body, yasok b'torah, you should learn Torah Shnei Amar l'chol b'saro marpeh, because it says your entire flesh will be healed by the words of Torah. Amar Rav Yehuda b'Rabbi Chaya. So Rav Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Chaya, said, Bo ur'eh shelo kemidat HaKadosh Baruch Hu midat basar vadam. That Hashem's way is not like the way of human beings. Midat basar vadam, adam noten sam l'chavero, lazeh yafeh v'lazeh kasheh. In human terms, if you give medicine to one person, the medicine could be beneficial. Another person takes the same medicine, it could kill them. Right? Not all medicines are good for all people. But Hashem is not the same. But Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people. It's a source of healing for their entire body. So not only is it good for anybody, it's good for the entirety of your body. So it just like, in other words, there's two problems with medicine. One problem with medicine is that medicine will be good for one person but bad for another person. That's why we always have to tell kids, medicine is not candy. It looks like candy, but it's not, because it's dangerous for them to take medicine that's not for them. Even though the medicine will heal somebody who's sick, it can damage somebody who's healthy. But also we know that a medicine that might be good for one thing can harm you in other ways. So you take a medicine for one thing and then it harms your liver. You take a medicine for your heart, it's a problem with your liver. You take a medicine for your liver, it harms your blood pressure. There's all kinds of different balances that have to be struck. But the Torah is the chol b'saro marpeh. It's good for your entire body. So it's not going to throw one subsystem in your body out of balance, so to speak. So, because it affects your totality, it's good for every aspect of the person. Amar Rabbi Ami says, Mai dichtiv, what does it mean in the pasuk? Ki na'im ki tishmerem bevitnecha yikonu yahdav al sifatecha. It says they are pleasant when you guard them in your stomach. Yikonu yachdav, they will be established together al sifatecha, on your lips. Matai divrei Torah na'im or na'imim. When are divrei Torah pleasant? Bizman shetishmerim bevitnecha. When you guard them in your stomach. In other words, when they're a part of you, when they're inside you. Matai tishmerim bevitnecha. And when are you going to keep them inside of you? Bizman sheyikonu yachdav al sifatecha. When they are established on your lips. In other words, when you speak them aloud. Not just when you think about them, but when you discuss them aloud. Rabbi Zera Amar Mehacha. From here, Simcha le'ish b'ma'neh piv, that it says it's the answer of a person's mouth is a joy to him. V'davar be'ito matov. And how good is something in its proper time? When is it happy for a person? When he has an answer in his mouth. In other words, when you're asked a question and you know the answer, it makes you feel good. Right? It's good to know what you're talking about, because when you have when you have an answer in your mouth, that's a good feeling. Lishana Harina, another version is, when is a person going to have joy from the answer that's in their mouth? Bizman shedavar be'itov matov, when a thing in its time is very good. So Rashi explains, what does this mean? He says, sheyodea lidrosh hilchot chag bechag. that he's teaching Hilchot Chag B'Chag, he's teaching something or he's studying something which is timely and appropriate. So for example, on Pesach he's learning the halachot of Pesach. Okay? On Sukkot he's learning the halachot of Sukkot. So therefore what happens? Somebody comes and asks him a question and he knows the answer because he's learning something which is relevant to that time. If he's learning the laws of Rosh Hashanah on Pesach, he's not going to have handy in his mind what is the answer to the question about Pesach, because he's learning about Rosh Hashanah. It's not going to help him. So that's why it's good to learn things davar b'ito matov. They'll learn them at the right time. So Rashi gives another alternative answer. Davar acher ematay simcha leish ematay adam samech b'talmudo bezman sheyesh lo ma'aneh kisholin mimeno dvar halacha. That's what I already said. That a person is joyous when he is able to answer a person's question about halacha. So what we see here is that it's important, number one, to say things. To speak out what you're saying, in other words, to verbalize your learning and not just to have it in your mind. And secondly, we have the idea that when you're learning something that's timely and you're on the ball, you know what you're talking about, that's a very satisfying experience. Rabbi Yitzchak says from here, that the thing is very close to you. It's in your mouth and in your heart to do it. When is it going to be close to you? When it's in your mouth and your heart. In other words, not just in your heart but also in your mouth, that you discuss the words of Torah and you verbalize what you're learning. Rava says from here, it says in Tehillim, you have given him the desire of his heart, and the arrangement, the expression of his lips, you have not stopped. When have you given him the desire of his heart? At the time when you haven't stopped the expression of his lips. In other words, what is it that makes him worthy of having Hashem fulfill his wishes? When he's able to articulate them with his mouth. Okay, that's when it is. Rava pointed out there's somewhat of a contradiction here, because on one hand it says you gave him the desires of his heart, which implies he didn't express them. And then it says you didn't stop the expression of his lips, which implies he did express them. So which is it? When he was worthy, you gave him the desires of his heart even without him having to ask. Lo zacha. But when he wasn't worthy, then, at least when he expressed himself, when he articulated his desires and he did a proper tefillah, then you answered him, you responded to his call. It was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Kol makom shene'emar netzach sela va'ed en lo hefsek olamit. Whenever you see the words netzach, sela, or va'ed, it means eternally. Netzach dichtiv. How do we know netzach? Because it says Kilo le'olam ariv lo le'netzach iktof. Because it says I will not fight forever and I will not be angry for eternity. So netzach means eternity. Sela dichtiv. Like we heard, so we saw in the city of Hashem, in the city of our God. May Hashem establish it forever. Selah. So what do you see? Selah is a way of saying forever. Va'ed. How do we know va'ed means forever? Dichtiv Hashem yimloch le'olam va'ed, because it says Hashem will reign forever and ever. So these three words are expressions of eternity. Now we have a siman anakim lechayav luchot charut or cherut, either one. So we have four words that are going to help us remember the upcoming statements of Rabbi Elazar. Amar Rabbi Elazar, it should be, not Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Rabbi Elazar, my dichtiv v'anakim legargarotecha. They are chains or a necklace around your neck. Im mesim adam atzmo ka'anak zeh sheraf ala tzavar. Nir'eh v'nir'eh v'no nir'eh talmudo mitkayem biyado v'im lav ein talmudo mitkayem biyado. If a person places the words of Torah, if a person places himself like a chain around the neck that is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen, okay, that is loose on the neck, so sometimes it's seen and sometimes it's not seen. When he lifts up his neck, you might see it. When he holds his neck normally, you won't see it, okay, because it's loose and it's under his beard. Okay? So he says that person is the person who's going to succeed in learning. In other words, he's like a chain that's sometimes hidden and sometimes revealed, which means to say he's humble. He's not always trying to be in the spotlight. He's not always trying to be in the center of attention. Rabbi Elazar said, it says in Shir HaShirim, his cheeks are like the arugat habosem are like the garden of fragrant spices. Im mesim adam atzmo ka'aruga zo she'akol dashin ba v'chabosem ze she'akol mitbasit min ba talmudo mitkayem v'im lav in talmudo mitkayem. If a person makes himself like a garden that everybody tramples, in other words, he's humble. He doesn't mind letting others walk over him, so to speak. So he has humility, he has modesty, and he smells beautiful. Everybody becomes, so when you walk through the garden of fragrant spices, you're able to trample it and you walk away smelling great. Right? So what does he say? What does that mean? That means that the Talmid Chacham lowers himself before other people, but he teaches everybody. So they walk away smelling great. That type of person is the one who's going to succeed in his learning, who doesn't make a big deal out of himself, but makes a big deal out of other people by imparting his knowledge to the other people. Rabbi Elazar said, "My dichtiv luchot even." What does it mean, luchot even? That the stones, the tablets, were made of stone. Even. So, what is it referring to? If a person makes himself, he makes his cheeks. Luchot even comes from lechi. It's saying that it comes from the word cheeks. Okay, so. He says if he makes his cheeks like stone, that's not wiped away. In other words, if he can take heat, he can take people attacking him, he can take people putting him down, and he's like Evan. Okay, people can walk over him, and it doesn't matter. He's strong as a rock.
Thick-skinned.
Right? He's thick-skinned. He can take. That person's going to be a Talmid Chacham. Why? Because a person who can't do that has a big ego. It's all about ego. So if you're able to take it, you don't have a big ego, you're able to let things go. If you have a big ego, so then you're also not going to be able to learn, because that means you're self-absorbed. Another possibility is, Rashi says, that the person has a face like flint also could mean that he learns, that he has the strength to learn and to review and to learn and to review. But really it's the same idea, because the person who's humble recognizes the need for review. The person who has a big ego thinks he read something one time and he's got it. The person who understands that, maybe I didn't get it, I have to go over it 25 times, 100 times, that person is really the person who has the humility to be able to succeed. Certainly true. And that's true in every area, really. Not just in Talmud Torah, but even in learning a skill. The musician who doesn't practice, he thinks he plays the song one time, he knows the song, he's also not good. You need to practice, real musicians, they practice 6 hours a day. At least they practice like a full-time job. They practice constantly because they recognize the skill will fade if they don't continually practice. And this is true of learning Torah as well. Luchot Even. So another point about Luchot Even. Amar Rabbi Elazar said, Ve'amar Rabbi Elazar further said, My dichtiv charut ala luchot, that the words were inscribed on the luchot. Ilmale lo nishtabru luchot harishonot. It means that if the first luchot had never been broken, they were broken because of the chet of the egel hazahav. Lo nishtachat Torah mi Yisrael. Then the Torah never would have been forgotten from Israel, because charut means engraved. In other words, the Jewish people would have never lost the Torah. They never would have fallen from the Torah forever. Now, it doesn't mean that the Torah has been forgotten. Obviously, it hasn't been forgotten. But the point is that the impression that the Torah made on the Jews in that generation never would have been diminished. It would have been engraved on them had they not done the Chet Egel. The Chet Egel, you have a setback. A person can be at a very high level in development, and they have one major setback, and it's very difficult to recover. It's true in addictions too. A person can be very good, and they fall into an addiction, alcoholism, or anything like that, or any kind of problem, and they can lose tons of ground in 1 minute, and it's not easy to regain the ground that's been lost. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, "En kol umah v'lashon sholetet behen." That if they had never done the Chet Egel, if they had never done the sin of the golden calf, then no other nation ever would have ruled over the Jewish people. Shneimar charut, because it says charut. Al tikre charut, ela chirut. Charut means chirut, freedom. They would have been free from the domination of others. Amar Rav Matana said, "My dechtiv midbar Matana." He must have liked this pasuk because it was named after him. His name was Rav Matana, and he comments on the pasuk. What does it mean? Mi midbar Matana, from the desert gift. If a person makes himself like the desert that everybody walks all over, then he'll become a Talmid Chacham. But if he doesn't, then he's not going to be able to hold on to his Torah. If he allows himself to get a big head and a big ego, he's not going to succeed. Rav Yosef Bar Chama, Rav Yosef Ba'adeh. Rav Yosef, Rava, the son of Rav Yosef Bar Chama, was in trouble with Rav Yosef, meaning Rav Yosef had an issue with him. He had some kind of resentment towards him. So came Erev Yom Kippur. Amar, he said to himself, Rav Yosef said, Rava Bered Rav Yosef said, and it's not his father. It's a different Rav Yosef. Okay? So, Ezel ve'afaisei. I want to go and make up with this Rav Yosef. I don't want to leave Yom Kippur and not make up with him. So, he saw that the servant of Rav Yosef was pouring him a drink. Now, Rav Yosef was blind, by the way. Amar le, he said, Havli ve'imzege ana. He said, give me the cup, I want to pour it for him, I want to serve him. Yahavle mizge, so he gave it to him. Yahavle mazge, he mixed it. Kidita'ame amar, when Rav Yosef tasted the wine, he said, Dameh hai miziga, le miziga de Rava Bered Rav Yosef bar Chama. This wine tastes just like the wine that Rava, the son of Yosef bar Chama, makes. So he obviously had they say that when you lose a sense, you lose your eyesight or hearing, so the other senses become very keen, right? They become more keen. So you could tell. Now it happens to be that it tells us elsewhere in the Talmud that he was very precise about the way that he used to mix the wine, that he was a baki, he was an expert in measuring out the right proportion of wine to water and so on. Amarle anahu. He said to him, it's me. It's me. So Amar Le, he said to him, Lo tetiv akarech, don't sit down, ad mifarshat li hanekra'eh. Don't sit down until you explain the following psukim to me. Mai dechtiv, what does it mean? Umi midbar matana, umi matana nachaliel, umi nachaliel bamot, umi bamot hagai. What does it mean? From the desert, gift, and from gift, nachaliel, inheritance of God, and from nachaliel bamot, and from nachaliel the high places, and from bamot, from the high places, hagai, the valley. So what is this referring to? What is this talking about? So Amar Le, he said to him, Im Adam mesim atzmo kamidbar ze she'akol dashin bo. If a person makes himself like a desert that anyone can walk over, Torah nitna lo b'matana. The Torah will be given to him as a gift. That's why it says from midbar to matana. Vekevan shenitna lo b'matana nichalo el. And once the Torah is given to him as a gift, God makes him an inheritance. Shenemar u'mimatana nachali el. He becomes the inheritance of God. Vekevan shenechalo el. And once God makes him an inheritance, oleh l'gdula, he rises to greatness. Shenemar u'minachali el bamot. From being an inheritance of God, you become at the high places. However, v'megith libo, if he becomes arrogant, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mashpilo, the Holy One, blessed be He, will lower him. Shenemar u'mibamot hagai. Because then it says, from the high places to the valley. So don't think that because you're on top of the world now, you're going to be there forever. If you get a big head, they'll go back down to Vim Chozerbo. But if he does teshuvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu magbio, then Hashem can raise him up again. Shenemar kol get yenaseh. It says every valley will be lifted up. Very famous pasuk. And from Yeshayahu. Yeah, it's from Yeshayahu. Right. So it says that you could be low and you'll be raised up again. So Amar Rav Huna says, what does it mean when it says in Tehillim that your animal will sit in it, and what you prepared in your goodness for a poor person, Hashem? If a person makes himself like a chaya that tears and eats, then Hashem has prepared good things for him, right? Tachin b'tovatcha le'ani Elohim means Hashem prepared good things for him. So Rashi says, yeah. So Rashi says, Miyad la'achar harigata she'eno makpid al ta'anugim el ochel basar b'lo tivalein v'chein shar inugin. Rashi says that a person who tears up his food and eats it, in other words, he's not worried about it. It doesn't have to be gourmet. Just give me the plain food. I don't make airs about how I eat. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be that. He enjoys it at a basic level. That person is the person that Hashem is going to prepare for them because they're a humble person. They're not looking for the finer things in life. They enjoy whatever they have. Some say that what makes him like a wild animal, not that he tears and eats, meaning that he doesn't put preparation time into his food, but the fact that he dirties and eats. So Rashi says, Batit. What it means is just like an animal doesn't say, oh, this food is dirty, I can't eat it. An animal eats right out of the garbage, they eat anywhere. So too, this person doesn't have a big ego that he says, oh, that food is not just right, it's not perfect, so even if it's a little bit dirty, he'll eat it. Lishna harina. An alternative is shedoreset ve'ochelet. What does it mean to tear and eat? It means that the chacham, that immediately after he learns, shedoreset, that he goes through something once, he immediately reviews it. Okay, so it's metaphoric. It's not talking actually about food. And what does it mean, masrachat v'ochelet, that he dirties himself and eats, or he dirties the food and eats? It means that he dirties himself in order to learn Torah. In other words, he doesn't hold himself up in an arrogant way, but he lowers himself and he humbles himself to learn Torah. And he says that, and Rashi says that he likes this interpretation better, because he says that the Torah says, that the Talmud says in many places that Talmidei Chachamim are supposed to eat in a dignified way. They're not supposed to tear into the food like they're animals. So he says he prefers to interpret it spiritually, that it means that when they learn, they immediately review. Or when they learn, they don't put on airs about themselves. They conduct themselves humbly when it comes to learning. And then it says Talmudo mitkayem biyado v'im lav in Talmudo mitkayem biyado v'im oseken, and if he does this, Hakadosh Baruch Hu oseh lo seuda be'atzmo, Hashem will prepare him a meal himself. Shenemar techin b'tovatcha le'ani Elohim, that it says Hashem will prepare what he has prepared for the poor person. In other words, this person who has lowered himself and humbled himself, Hashem is going to prepare whatever he needs. Now that either means, according to the first version, that it means that if he doesn't take himself too seriously when it comes to eating, he doesn't have a haughty way of eating, thinking that he's such a gourmet, so then Hashem will prepare for him whatever he needs. Alternatively, it means if he humbles himself in learning, realizing the need to review, realizing the need to go over things, realizing the need not to hold himself up too high when it comes to learning, then Hashem will facilitate his learning and help him to succeed in his learning. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yochanan said, Mai dichtiv notzer te'ena yochal pirya. The person who guards the te'ena, the fig tree, will eat from its fruit. Lama nimshilu divrei Torah ke'te'ena. Why are the words of Torah compared to a fig? Ma te'ena zo, just like a fig tree, as we turn to Amud Bet, kol zman she'adam mimashmesh ba motzeh ba te'enim. The more you play around with the tree, the more you find figs. And Rashi says, she'en mitbashlin bevat achat. They don't ripen all at once. They ripen over a long period of time. So you could go out one day, you'll find some figs. The next day you go out and there are more figs. You don't harvest it all at once, but you find them all the time. So too, whenever a person studies Torah, he always finds new ideas, new insights. Even if he goes over the same thing that he's gone over before, he finds new things. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says, "Ma'ay dechtiv ayelet ahavim." What does it mean? A hind of love, v'ya'alatchen, and what's a ya'ala is a hind, right? But it's two words for a hind. There's another kind of animal. These are two kinds of hinds. Okay, so of grace. Lama nimshlu divrei Torah la'ayelet. Why is it that the Torah is compared to the hind? Lomar lecha, to tell you, ma ayela, just like this ayala, this hind, rachamatzar v'chavival bo'ala kol shah v'sha'a k'shah rishona. Apparently, and I don't know much about the sexual behavior of hinds, but apparently the woman, the female hind, it always appeals to the husband because her body never changes. Right. So the body of her body never changes. It always remains very narrow and very youthful. So he never loses his interest in her. So too, it's just like the first time. Every time you learn Torah, it's so exciting and enthralling. Just like the first time, just like with hinds, that every time they're together with one another, it's like the first time. V'yalatchen shema'alatchen alomedeh. What's the word ya'alatchen? It means that it lifts up, it raises up chen, it raises up grace on those who learn it. Right. What does it say? Effuses? Okay. Good word, okay. It says, her breasts will satisfy you all the time. Why is it that the divrei Torah are compared to a breast? Just like whenever the baby needs to go nurse, he finds milk. So too, whenever we search for the Torah to find satisfaction, we find new ideas. It says you should immerse yourself in her love all the time. Kegon Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat, like it says about Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat. Amro alav Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat shehaya yoshev osek b'Torah b'shuk hatachton shel tzipori. That it says about him that he would be studying Torah in the lower shuk of tzipori. Usidino mutal b'shuk elyon shel tzipori, and he would leave his cloak in the upper shuk of tzipori. In other words, he was so engrossed in the learning of Torah, he was so involved in the learning, he enjoyed it so much that he forgot his cloak, he forgot himself. He wasn't, he lost his, he was like an absent-minded professor, I guess you could say, in the sense that he wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, and he would forget things because he was so involved. Just like somebody who's enamored with somebody, who's involved in love with somebody, forgets everything else except the thing that they're in love with. So that's what happens when a person's engaged with the words of Torah, that they can forget everything else that would otherwise possibly be important to them. So the next piece, according to the side, according to Masorah Shas, shouldn't be here. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, the word Tanya shouldn't be here. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar says, Pam achat ba'adam litlo umatzah bo saraf, that once somebody came to take the cloak, because we said that Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat would leave his cloak in one place, he would be walking involved in Torah so much he would forget his coat, right? He would forget it all the time. Apparently that happened regularly, because otherwise they wouldn't say. One time people forget their coat for all kinds of reasons. He would forget his cloak all the time. So what does it show you? So they were so involved. But it said one time somebody went to take it because he saw an abandoned cloak, and what happened? There was a snake sitting on it. In other words, Hashem sent the snake guarding it so nobody would take it. Tana Devei Rav Anan, it was taught in the yeshiva of Rav Anan, Mai dechtiv rochavei atonot tzechorot. This is from the Shirat Devorah. Those who ride on the white donkeys, Yoshevei al midin, those who sit in judgment, and those who walk on the way, discuss. Rochavei atonot, what are the people who ride on the donkeys or on the female donkeys? Elu talmidei chachamim. These are the scholars of Torah. Shemalachin me'ir la'ir medina lemdina lilmod Torah. These are the talmidei chachamim who go from city to city and from state to state in order to learn Torah. Tzechorot. What does it mean? Tzechorot. It means white usually, but here it means she'osin oto otak tzahorayim. They make the Torah as bright as the afternoon. In other words, they clarify the words of Torah. They shine the light of the Torah from their learning. Yoshevei al midin, those who sit in judgment, shedanin din emet la'amito, that they judge a judgment which is true to truth. And Tosafot explains true to truth means not just true, passably true, but in elsewhere. He doesn't explain it here, but he explains in other Masechtot that emet la'amito means that even if you could justify that you did your best, if they suspect that there might be a stone unturned, that maybe some of the evidence wasn't exactly right, the witnesses weren't exactly good, even though in other words, sometimes somebody's just worried about covering themselves. They could say, listen, the evidence was brought to me, the witnesses said this, I decided the case. But it's a further level of truth to say, I want to investigate the witnesses and make sure they're credible. I want to investigate the evidence and make sure it's credible. Because I'm not just satisfied with the fact that what I say is justified. I want to make sure it's true. That's emet lamito. So Yoshevei al midin are those who do the most truthful judgment. And it says those who walk. Elo balei mikra. These are the ones who study Tanakh. Al derech, on the way. Elo balei Mishnah. These are those who study Mishnah. Sichu, speak. Elo balei Talmud. These are those who study Gemara. They study the Talmud. Shekol sichatan divrei Torah, because all their discussions are the words of Torah. Amar Rav Shizvi said, Mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, in the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Mai dichtiv lo yacharoch remiyat sedo, that the person who the deceitful person will not roast his catch. Lo yichyeh v'lo yarich yamim tzayad aramai. He said he will not live and he will not have a long life. The unlawful, the dishonest hunter. In other words, what it's saying is if a person is dishonest, they won't be able, so when it's saying lo yachroch, he won't be able to cook what he catches. In other words, the person will not be able to succeed in his tricks. So what does Rashi say? He learns it as a metaphor. He says what it means is, lo yachroch is interpreted lo yichyeh, that's yud chet, velo ya'arich. So yachroch is made up of two words. He won't live and he won't have a length of days. Tzayad ramai means shemarbeh bagirsa ve'eno mechazer alea, that he learns a lot but he doesn't review. Why does he do that? Because you could learn a lot and you show off for the short time, look how much I know. If you just went over the material right now, you say, look how much I know. But if you don't review it, then 2 days from now, you don't know anything. So you're able to project that you know a lot. Isn't that how we all passed tests back in college? I mean, that's what I did. You cram for the test. I used to take like the hard courses, let's say like anatomy and physiology or something like that. I would take my notebook. I would get up in the morning. For 3 hours, I would copy my notes. Copy all the notes out from the whole quarter, whatever it was. They would be fresh in my mind because I just wrote them. I would go to the test to get 100 on the test. The next day I didn't remember one thing. But the short-term memory is very powerful. So it's saying, so the Tzayad Ramai, the person who looks like a trickster because he just practiced this 5 minutes ago, so it looks like he knows a lot, but he doesn't review, so he doesn't really know. So he's not going to be able to survive that way for long. The charade will not last forever. Okay, now, but another interpretation, Rav Sheshet Amar Tzayad Ramai Yachroch, that it's not a statement that he won't be able to cook his deceitful capture, his deceitful catch. What it's saying is, it's actually a rhetorical question. It's saying, will he not be able to roast what he catches? So Rashi, one second, is this the? Trying to make sure I'm going to the right place. Yeah, so Rashi says, Rav Sheshet Amar, En ze ramai el shoteh, ve'akovetz al yad, hu ramai va'arum badavar, v'hu yachroch. In other words, what he says is, that's not a ramai. In other words, we're not talking about a bad person. When it said in the pasuk, the deceitful person, the trickster who catches things will not have a long life, that's not what it's saying. It's saying the person who's deceitful will have a long life. Why? Because it doesn't mean deceitful literally, Rashi says. Rav Sheshet says deceitful means he's calculated. In other words, the person who's very calculated, v'hakovetz al yad. In other words, he learns piece by piece. He doesn't try to capture everything at once, but he's very calculated and conniving with his learning. And he says, I'm going to do a little piece, and then another little piece, and then another little piece. That's actually smart. He says the first guy is not a good Ramai, he's just a fool because he tried to ingest a whole bunch of knowledge at once. He's not going to have anything. But the person actually, the Ramai, the trickster who's successful, he could be successful if he's a trickster in the sense that he is calculated in approaching, learning, and doing it step by step. And that's what Rav Sheshet says. So Kiyata Rav Dimi said, Amar Mashal Tzayad Shetzad Tziporim. It's like a hunter who catches birds. Im Rishon Mishaber Kenafav. If each one that he captures, he breaks its wings, Mishtamer, he'll keep them. V'im lav in Mishtamer. But if he doesn't, then he won't in Mishtamer, then he's not going to be able to keep them. In other words, what he's saying is, as you learn each piece, review it, integrate it with your other knowledge, make sure you've got it, and then move on to the next piece. And now the next, there's a correction in the text. It says Amar Rabba, and it should say Rava. Amar Rava, Amar Rav Sechora, Amar Rav Huna. Mai dichtiv hon mehevel yimat vekovetz al yad yerbeh. What does it mean when it says that wealth from nothing will be diminished, but somebody who collects by hand will increase? So what does this mean? What it means is Amar Rava says. I'm sorry, so this is the explanation actually of Rava in the name of Rav Schora and the name of Rav Huna. If a person tries to learn Torah in big packages, it will be diminished. But if not, if he takes it piece by piece, bit by bit, in small bite-sized chunks, then he'll be able to acquire knowledge. Amar Rava says, the rabbis know this, but they violate it all the time. They try to take too much. They try to ingest too much knowledge. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, ana avadata ve'kayem biyadai. So Rav Nachman says that actually I did this and it stayed with me. So Rashi says, "L'kbotz al yad," I took bit by bit. V'chazarti alea ad she'chazakti ba, v'achar כך chazarti v'shamati acheret. Rav Nachman says, I used this strategy of taking a small bit at a time and digesting it, and I was able to keep my learning as a result of that strategy. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ketzad Seder Mishnah. How was the Mishnah taught, or how was the Torah Shebal Peh taught? Okay, so Moshe lamad mipi hagvura. Moshe learned the oral tradition from Hashem. Nichnas Aharon v'shanalo. Then Aharon would come in, and Moshe would teach him. V'shanalo Moshe pirko. He would teach him everything that he learned. Nistalek Aharon v'yashav l'smol Moshe. So then Aharon would go and sit to the left of Moshe. Nichnasu banav. The children of Aharon would come in. V'shanalehen Moshe pirkan, and then Moshe would teach them. Nistalku banav. Elazar yashav liyamin Moshe. That Elazar would sit to the right of Moshe, and Itamar l'smol Aharon, and Itamar would sit to the left of Aharon. So in other words, first Moshe learns it, then he teaches it to Aaron, then he teaches it to the sons. Aaron is sitting to the left of Moshe. Now Elazar is sitting to the left, to the right of Moshe, and Itamar is sitting to the left of Aaron. Rabbi Yehuda Omer leolam Aharon liyamin Moshe. Liyamin Moshe chozer. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, once the sons came in, Aharon switched to the right side of Moshe, and the sons would go to the left. But either way, Nichnasu Zikenim, then the elders came in, V'shanalhen Moshe Pirkan, and then Moshe would teach the elders. Nistalku Zikenim, the elders would move away, Nichnasu Kol Ha'am, then everybody would come in, V'shanalhen Moshe Pirkan, and Moshe would teach the entire people. Nimtzu Biyad Aharon Arba'a. So what we find is, Aharon learned it 4 times. Biyad banav shlosha. The children heard it 3 times. Uviyad hazikenim shnayim. Uviyad kol ha'am echad. So what ends up happening is Aharon hears it 4 times because he hears it once to himself, once to his sons, once to the elders, once to the people. The sons hear it 3 times. Once to themselves, once to the elders, once to the people. The elders hear it twice. Once to themselves, once to the people, and the people hear it once. Nista like Moshe, then Moshe would leave. Vishana lehen Aharon pirko. And Aharon would tell over the learning to everybody again. Nista like Aharon would leave. Shanu lehen banav pirkan. And then the children of Aharon would teach it. Nistalku banav, the children would leave. Shanu lehen zikenim pirkan. And then the elders would teach it to the people. Nimtza biyada kol arba'a. So then all the people ended up learning it 4 times. Once from Moshe, once from Aaron, once from the sons, and once from the elders. So everybody involved hears it multiple times. First of all, at least once from Moshe. The most is Aharon, but everybody hears at least once from Moshe. And everybody hears, and the Hamon Am, the common people, go over it at least 4 times. Mikan Amar Rabbi Eliezer learned from here that a person has to teach their student everything 4 times. And it's a kal v'chomer. We reason from the lighter case to the more stringent case. Oma Aharon shelamad mipi Moshe uMoshe mipi hagivura kachediot mipi hadiot alachat kama v'chama. If Aharon, who learned from Moshe, and Moshe after all learned directly from Hashem, if he needed it 4 times to grasp it, certainly a regular person teaching another regular person needs at least 4 times. Rabbi Akiva says, Minayin shechayav adam lishnot talmido ad sheyilmedeno, or ad sheyilamedenu. Could be either one. That how do we know that a person needs to teach a student until he succeeds in learning it? Sheyilmedenu, probably, that he learned it properly. How do we know that? In other words, there's no number. It's not numeric. It's not 4 according to Rabbi Akiva. It's as many times as it takes. How do we know that? Because it says v'lamedah et bnei Yisrael. It says you shall teach it to bnei Yisrael, meaning teach it until they get it. And how do we know that it has to be organized in their mouths? Meaning not just that they heard it, but what does sidura b'fiv mean? Organized in your mouth means that if I ask you what did you learn, you can say it. Right? How do we know that? Shene'emar, as it says, simah b'fihem, place it in their mouths. So it's not enough to tell them. And how do we know? Laharot lo panim literally means to show face. But Rashi explains, laharot lo panim means to give the explanation. It's not enough to teach memorization. You got to teach the reason behind things. Because it says in the pasuk, these are the laws you shall place before them. In other words, you should place it before them organized in a way that they see the reasons behind everything and they understand why everything is and they fully grasp the picture. Why is it that Moshe teaches 4 times only? He teaches 4 times to Aaron, 3 times to the sons, 2 times to the Zekinim, and 1 time to the people. Why doesn't he just teach the people 4 times? Why do you then have to bring in Aharon to teach a few times, and then the sons have to teach a few times, and then the Zekenim have to teach? Why can't Moshe teach everybody? Because we want to show respect to Aaron, his children, and the Zekenim, and the elders. V'nei ol Aharon v'nigmar mi-Moshe v'li'ayilu banav v'ligmiru me-Aharon v'li'ayilu zikinim v'lilfu mi-banav v'leizlu v'ligmarenu l'chulu Yisrael. So why can't we do it like this? Aharon will come in and learn from Moshe. Then the sons can come in and learn from Aharon. And then the zikinim can come and learn from the sons. Why doesn't that work? That's also giving kavod to them. And then let the zikinim go and teach everybody. So that way everybody gets to be a part of the teaching. So you're also giving kavod. Kevan de Moshe mipia gvura gamar mistayea milte. That since Moshe Rabbeinu learned it directly from Hashem, he had special divine assistance in his teaching, that he was able to get it across to everybody at a level they would understand very quickly. Not everybody else had that benefit. So therefore there was a special benefit in hearing it directly from Moshe, for everybody to hear it directly from Moshe, even if it was just once. And fine, the review was done for the people by Aharon, his sons, Zakenim, but at least for everybody to hear it from Moshe directly one time. Amar, the master said, Rabbi Yehuda said, the Olam Aharon li'amin Moshe, Choser, that really there was a machloket, right? That when Aharon would first learn with Moshe, he would sit to the left, then the sons would come in. According to the first opinion, Aharon would stay there. According to the second opinion, no, now Aharon switches to the right side, and the sons go to the left and right. So, Kiman Azla Haditanya. Who is this following bright the following? Shelosha shahayu mahalachin baderech harav be'emtza v'gadol b'mino v'katan b'smolo. That it says that if 3 people are walking on the way, a teacher and 2 students, the rabbi goes in the middle, the rav goes in the middle, the greater of the students goes to the right, and the lesser of the students go to the left. Lema Rabbi Yehudahi v'lo Rabbanan. This brighta must be following Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda says that Aharon had to get up and move to the right of Moshe, because he was the greatest of the students. No, afilu tema Rabbanan. Even the rabbis agree. Mishum tirchat de Aharon, because in this case, Aharon already sat down next to Moshe to the left. So we're making him get up and move to the right. That they're not going to do. Everybody agrees normally if you're walking on the way and you have 2 people flanking the Rav, that the greater of the students should go to the right and the lesser of the students should go to the left. But here Aharon was already sitting to the left. The question is, do we make him get up and move to the right? Rabbi Pereda hava lehahu talmida dahava tanele arba'am ma'az zimne. Rabbi Pereda had a student that he would have to teach him each thing 400 times before he would get it. Vegamar, and finally he would learn it. Yomachad ba'yu al milta de mitzvah. One day they needed Rabbi Pereda for some important mitzvah that he had to attend to. They were calling him for something. Tanale velo gamar. Even after he taught him the 400 times, the student could not get it. Talk about bad timing. Because now Rabbi Pereda has to go do a mitzvah, and he can't get the slow student, to grasp it. Amar le, he said to him, I'm sorry, I skipped the part. Oh no, I didn't. Amar le, he said to him, Ha'idana ma'ishana. He said to him, why is 400 times not working today? Why are you still not getting it? Amar le, he said to him, Midahi shata. He said, because the Amar le lemar ika milta de mitzvah aschai ledatai. He said, from the moment that they told you that they need you to go, I can't concentrate. V'chol shata amina hashtaka emar hashtaka emar. And every second I'm thinking, oh, the master's going to get up, he's going to leave. So I'm so focused on, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get this and the teacher's going to leave, I'm not going to get this and the teacher's going to leave, I'm not going to have a chance, that I can't focus on what we're learning. So he said to him, Amar le, hav datech vatnelech. Focus your mind and I'm going to teach you. Hadar tanale daled me'azimne achrine. He taught him another 400 times. Nafka bat kala. A divine voice came out, Va'amarle, and he said to him, Nichalech, would it be better for you, Rabbi Pereda, that you have 400 extra years added to your life? O the tizkuat V'darach le'alma da'ateh, or that you and your entire generation should be able to go to the world to come. In other words, which would you rather have? 400 years in your life in this world? Or would you rather that your entire generation, including you, get into Olam Haba? Amar, he said, Dinisku ana v'darai le'alma da'ateh. He said, I would rather that I and my entire generation get into Olam Haba. I'm not just going to ask for myself to have 400 years, I want everybody. Amar lahen, Hashem said to the Malachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Tenu lo zo vazo. Give him both of them. Now, what is the concept of this story? Obviously, it's a beautiful story. On the surface, it tingles you a little bit, and you say, oh, that's a very touching story. But what's the point of the story? This is a person who cared so much, was so patient with his students. He cared so much, he would go over 400 times, and the student felt nervous because he knew that the rabbi was an important man, and he had to go. And he said, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you. I'll teach you another 400 times, and everything else will wait. And, the amazing patience that he had. And Hashem said, this is a true teacher, that, a real leader, that he cares about his students so much that he's willing to give them all the time in the world. And so he says, you deserve all the time in your world. You deserve everything. And then the teacher again says, I want for my whole generation, not just for me. So it just shows you the self-sacrifice and the dedication of a great teacher. It's a very inspiring story. And so he gets a long life as well as Olam Haba for his whole generation. Amar Rav Chisda said, Ein Torah niknet ela b'simanin. That the only way you can acquire the Torah is with signs, with mnemonics. Shenemar simah befihem, al tigrei simah ela simna. Don't read it as sima, place it in their mouths, but make signs for it. In other words, make mnemonics that will help you to recall the Torah so you won't forget the details. So it says, Shema'a Rav Tachlifa mima'arava, Azal Amra Kamed Rabbi Abahu. Rav Tachlifa heard this from the west, meaning he heard this from Eretz Yisrael, and he told it to Rabbi Abahu. Amar, he said, Atun mehatam matnitula. You guys learn it from that pasuk of Sima b'fihem. Anan, but we mehacham matninanla. We learn it from a different pasuk with the same concept, the concept that you need to. That you need to make signs and you need to make reminders for the Torah, but from a different pasuk. Hatzivi lach tziyunim, make for yourself tziyunim, markers, similach, etc. Asu tziyunim la Torah, make tziyunim, make signs for the Torah, make mnemonics to help you recall the details of the Torah. Umay mashma dahat tziyun lishana desimanahu. How do you know that the word tziyun means a sign? Dichtiv, because it says in a different pasuk in Yechezkel, v'ra'a etzem adam uvana etzlo tziyun, because it says he would see a bone of a person and he would build a tziyun next to it. A tziyun was the biblical word for a matzeva, what we put as a grave marker. Okay, so it's using that term, the same term, to make tziyunim, make markers for the Torah, make ways of remembering the Torah. Rabbi Eliezer Amar Mehacha, Rabbi Eliezer says from here, Emor lechochma achotiat, say to wisdom, you are my sister. Umoda labinat tikra, and call understanding your friend, which means asu or aseh modaim la Torah, make reminders for the Torah. Moda is something that makes you aware. So create reminders that will remind you of the Torah. Rava Amar Rava says, Aseh mo'adim la Torah, make times for the Torah. Rashi says, Kav'u itim, establish times the talmidechem for your students. Sheyid'u et lavo v'lishnot, they know what time to come and to learn. We turn to Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Ainu da Amar Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Dosa. This is what Rabbi Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Dosa says. My dechtiv. What does it mean in the pasuk? Lo v'shamayim hi. It's not in the heavens. V'lo me'ever layam hi. That it's not up in the Torah is not in the heavens and it's not across the sea. Lo v'shamayim hi shim b'shamayim hi ata tzarich lalot achareha. Ve'im me'ever layam hi ata tzarich lavor achareha. That when the Torah says it's not in the heavens and it's not across the ocean, it's not saying it will never be. It's saying it isn't right now. But if it were up in the heavens, you would need to get there. If it were across the sea, you would need to get there. And what does Rashi say this means? It means you need to do whatever is necessary to be able to learn and retain the Torah. Sometimes that means using strategies and using all kinds of tricks to help you to absorb it and to help you to retain it. And we'll just do the last part here. Rava Amar Rava says, Lo v'shamayim hi. What does it mean the Torah is not in heaven? That lo timtza or lo timatzeh, it will not be found b'mishim magbiyah dato alei kashamayim. Somebody who has a big ego, whose mind is raised up like the heavens. In other words, who thinks very highly of himself, will not be able to learn Torah. And he won't find Torah b'mishim archiv dato alei kayam. Somebody who has a broad ego. It's another word for being arrogant, like the oceans. In other words, somebody who's like the heavens or like the oceans, that they have a big head, you won't find Torah with them. Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo b'shamayim hi lo timateh b'gasei ruach, v'lo me'ever layam hi lo timateh lo b'sachranim, v'lo b'tigarim. That Rabbi Yochanan said, Lo b'shamayim hi, not in the heavens, means you won't find it with the arrogant, who are puffed up like the heavens, and you won't find it among the sachranim, among the salesperson, the people who are traveling salesmen and merchants who focus all of their energy. They go from city to city trying to sell their wares. So they're not people who are able to sit down and focus in learning and have the capacity. They're too focused on running after money to be able to effectively learn. And Rashi explains that when it says merchants, he says that you need to be humble. You need to be somebody who's not out there always trying to politic and to make sales and to enrich yourself, but you have to have the humility and the modesty to be able to succeed in learning of Torah.